For centuries, history books have pointed to a single day to mark the death of the Roman Empire, September 4th, 476 AD. That was the day the last Western emperor was formally deposed. Historians have spent generations trying to figure out exactly how a superpower of that magnitude vanished. They proposed over 210 distinct theories, ranging from lead poisoning to massive barbarian invasions. Focusing on the year 476 obscures the real injury. The fatal trauma occurred 200 years earlier, leaving the empire a ghost of itself long before the final deposition. In the middle of the 3rd century, the empire plunged into a 50-year period of chaos. To survive it, the government deployed a series of desperate economic and political measures that ultimately guaranteed the destruction of the state. To understand how a global superpower truly dies, we have to examine the exact moments it attempted to save itself. During the High Empire, the central government mostly focused on foreign relations and the military. Local municipalities handled day-to-day decisions. Property rights were secure, and taxes for the wealthy remained low, often sitting between 1% and 3%. This silver denarius was the engine of that stability. A uniform currency across the entire Mediterranean meant a merchant in Egypt could trade with a buyer in Gaul as easily as a neighbor. This reliable money supply allowed large-scale agriculture and manufacturing to boom. For the average citizen, the math made sense. The economic benefits of participating in the Roman market outweighed the minimal costs of being governed by Rome. That math broke down in 235 CE. When Emperor Alexander Severus tried to pay off Germanic tribes for peace instead of fighting them, his own troops assassinated him in his tent. The legions now dictated who wore the purple. Any general with enough silver to pay his men could claim the throne, leading to a half-century where over 20 emperors were crowned and subsequently murdered by the very soldiers who elevated them. With the borders unprotected and the administration paralyzed, the empire physically shattered into 3 competing factions: the Gallic Empire in the west, the Palmyrian Empire in the east, and a fractured Roman core. Political authority had moved from civic halls into the hands of a massive military that functioned as an extortionary force. To fund military loyalty, emperors minted millions of new coins with shrinking silver content. Citizens hoarded pure silver coins, paying taxes only with the worthless new ones. State revenues plummeted. Emperors printed more cheap coins, pushing inflation from 0.7 up to 22.9%. In a desperate effort to maintain a bloated military, the state cannibalized the private wealth of its own people. Take a look at this stone slab. This fragment of the Edict on Maximum Prices shows Emperor Diocletian's attempt to mandate economic stability in 301 AD. It strictly capped the prices of over 1,200 goods and services. Producers responded to these caps by stopping production entirely. The government had ignored the actual costs of manufacturing, leading to massive shortages across the empire. With trade stalled, the government resorted to outright confiscation to feed its army. It seized private estates and demanded that taxes be paid in kind, forcing citizens to hand over raw wheat, goods, and labor. These state interventions suffocated the engine of trade that had built the empire. By the 4th and 5th centuries, the Roman system had become a liability. Between rampant inflation and heavy-handed tax collectors, the cost of being a Roman citizen outweighed any protection the state could provide. Citizens responded with a mass exodus. People physically fled the heavily taxed cities for the countryside, seeking self-sufficiency on rural estates. This migration drained the urban centers of their labor and wealth. The complex, money-based economy dissolved, reverting back into localized agriculture, the beginning of medieval feudalism. By abandoning the system, the citizens survived, but the superpower was starved of its lifeblood. The barbarian sacks of 410 and 455 AD struck an administration that had already ceased to function. The invaders kicked in the door of a structure hollowed out by centuries of domestic decay. Historians view this era as a violent, multi-generational transition into the decentralized Middle Ages. Superpowers rarely die from a single outside blow. They collapse when the costs of maintaining their power destroy the prosperity that built them.